Apa kabar semuanya? Sehat? Oke. Hari ini kita kedatangan Liniho ya. Oke, ya, sana ya. People say that you look like Liniho. Is it true? I have no idea. Okay. Maybe more handsome than Liniho. Okay, because Liniho is only seen by in television, and now you're seeing Mr. David live here from Korea and from the United States of America. Before I start the public lecture, Mr. David, I would like to ask permission. Maybe we should have, 50-50 like Bahasa and English. I'm sure that the student of communication, and maybe I see that some of other other presenting program should be able to, learn English, understand English, and also speak English. Ya, Bapak Ibu ya. Ngerti kan ya? Oke. Ini udah bahasa kedua ya. Maksudnya bahasa pasti sekali insya Allah, mudah-mudahan. So, saya berharap public lecture ini akan berjalan dengan baik. Teman-teman bisa dipahami apa yang David disampaikan, dan yang paling penting adalah asking question. Oke. Kalau nanti disampaikan ada kendala dalam bahasa, nanti Mas akan membantu. Oke. Saya akan Okay, so before we start, let me just read a glimpse of David's curriculum briefing. So, David was an associate professor of communication arts in media studies from Ramambo College of New Jersey, America. And he's also a U.S. Fulbright Scholar resource person. He is now teaching in media and diversity, media literacy, research method, media and identity, communication theory, intercultural communication, and teaching in Hankook University of Higher Studies in South Korea. And as you see that David is actually having a Doctor of Philosophy, Mass Communication from Syracuse University. Where is that, David? Oh, New York. Okay, yang belum ke New York kita bisa tanya David ya. Okay, saya juga belum sih. 2002, he got a certificate completion of Korean language from Yonsei University College Language Institute. And in 2000, he had a Master of Arts, Broadcast Journalism from Newhouse School of Public Communication, and having a Bachelor of Art, okay, from Psychology and Journalism from Baylor University. And David is also a very diligent person because he got a lot of grants and fellowship. Jadi dari peraih beasiswa US Fulbright dari program dari AMEF, dari Amerika Serikat. Fulbright ini salah satu program beasiswa yang sangat ya, bukan mahal, tapi sangat prestisius. Jadi kalau teman-teman bisa search di Google ya, kalau mau apply mau Fulbright, monggo silakan. Saya pastikan Anda punya pesaing yang cukup banyak sekali. So, 2017, David mendapatkan grant sebesar $6.300 dari Faculty Development Fund dari Ramambo College of New Jersey, and also dapat lagi juga $5.000 di Development Fund dari Ramambo, and research grant from Syracuse University Fellow, dan juga mendapatkan award dari Faculty Research Paper Award Asian Pacific American Communication Study Division National Communication Association from Salt Lake City in 2018. Kalau saya bacakan mungkin kita selesai mungkin sekitar materinya, jadi kita mulai gitu kan. So jadi I would like to cut the CV because it's plenty of awesome achievement, right? Achievement. So I think we would very love to see how that Korean have a major development yang membuat mereka itu sejajar juga dengan yang namanya Amerika, Jepang, terus kemudian lagi negara-negara yang dewasa yang lain. Nah, salah satu yang kemudian menarik untuk kita bahas hari ini adalah terkait dengan gelombang Korea, gelombang culture. Okay, so apakah nanti kan kita bisa tanyakan diri ya. So is it like what is it, driven by the government for the Korean wave? Okay, apakah juga ada faktor-faktor lain yang mempengaruhi, gitu kan? Is there any other factors that influence that? Atau kalau teman-teman tahu ada paling cute culture. So do you know Pali culture? So Pali is a Korean word for hurry, right? Okay, so ada budaya mereka untuk bekerja dengan cepat, dan becoming a culture, and becoming apa namanya sebuah habit, and that actually influence mempengaruhi apa namanya perkembangan dari negara Korea itu sendiri. Like for example, they have built like a freeway from Seoul to Busan, if I'm not mistaken. So itu like 400 something kilometers, and it finished in less than the target time, something like that. So that's just what is it? Itu hanya contoh saja. Ada banyak contoh di mana bangsa Korea ini memang bangsa yang memang driven untuk maju, gitu seperti itu. Nanti kita akan bahas di sini. Dan bagaimana kemudian media di Korea juga melihat ini, mendorong agar si Korean Wave ini becoming one globalization industry, something like that. Okay. Nah, kalau saya yang bicara terus-terus kan nggak asik ya. So we will invite David to come and open here, or maybe he's going to be over there to speak about the Korean Wave. Kita kasih applause yang luar biasa ya, David.
Hello, everybody. So, for this presentation, I was asked to teach a class. And so, I came into the presentation with the idea that I would give the presentation like I would give a class discussion. And so, I would like us to be involved in this discussion as much as possible. So, if you would be willing to also talk and share your thoughts with kind of So before we get started with the presentation, what I'm interested in, what I've been asking people is whether they are interested, I guess, no, not so much whether they're interested, but rather why are people interested in Korean media here. So if you're interested in Korean media, tell me a little bit about why you're interested. I'm curious to know. Yes.
Okay.
I wait for hands still. I don't want to just make people talk.
My name is Nia. I for Korea in drama Korea. Drama Korea is like a real. Dari Korea dari semua sistem di lainnya di kayak lingkungan-lingkungannya, terus mana-mananya mereka selalu tampilan bawah itu loh budaya Korea.
bisa jujur dari komunikasi. Nah, karena cewek-cewek Korea itu dapat apa gitu.
Saya ini yang kita tahu. Di sini saya dari yang komunikasi. Ini saya suka Korea karena di sini Korea itu bisa apa ya, menunjukkan budaya Korea sendiri, makanan atau pokoknya budaya-budaya dalam video atau film sehingga orang luar itu mengenal budaya Korea itu dengan baik. Terima kasih. Oke, the Korean culture is actually
So you enjoy the fact that you can learn about what Korean life is like, Korean culture through different media. Right, very good. I'm also interested to know how you feel about Korean media being as widespread as it is. And let me ask something. People have been telling me that a lot of people watch Korean media, that it's become a very big thing here in Indonesia. Is that true? So I guess the other question I have is how do you feel about that? Is there, I'm sure some people like it, but maybe some people dislike it too. Would you mind sharing some of these thoughts with me? What do you think about it?
Saya yang pilih ini
is that how do you refer to the popular reception of South Korean media in other countries that increases the soft power of South Korea? So it's about the movement of South Korean popular media to other places, and the effect of this is to increase South Korean soft power. Are you all familiar with the idea of soft power? Do you know what that means? So there's a Harvard professor who came up with the term soft power in reference to what's considered hard power. So hard power is things like the military, using the economy, using intergovernmental regulation or tariff. These are hard power. And most of the time when people respond to these things, they don't like it, right? Because you feel the kind of oppressive power of some other country. But soft power refers to the ways in which culture, if it's spread around to other places, then that increases the persuasiveness, it increases the degree of liking that we have for a different country. Right? So for example, US media has become very widespread across the world, correct? And so if you listen to US media, if you watch movies like Avengers Endgame, maybe you start to have more positive feelings about the USA. That's what soft power refers to. But this idea is that because of this soft power, then the USA is able to have more power. It's able to do more things. Mostly it might mean that the USA becomes more legitimate and considered more legitimate by other countries around the world. And so for Korea too, one of the benefits that the government has seen with the popularity of Korean media is that it also has a soft power, right? People are more aware of South Korea now. When I was young, and when I would tell people that I came from Korea, the most common question would be North or South Korea. But now the question is more, if I say that I'm from Korea, they might say something like, oh, I know BTS. Or, I eat kimchi, I like that too. Right? And that refers to soft power, right? People are more knowledgeable now about South Korea simply because of Korean media and the way that it's spread around the world. Can we have our next slide, please? Okay. So, in terms of Korean media as the way, there have been some scholars who debated, really should we call this a wave or not? And primarily it's because Korean media have been very popular around this region. So Korean media is one of the major media hubs in Asia. So it used to be that it was Hong Kong, Japan, India, but now it's maybe Hong Kong, Japan, India, South Korea, and maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent, China. And so these nations are starting to act as regionally powerful media, but not necessarily globally powerful media. So as of right now, still, even though BTS is now well known in the United States, most people in the United States don't listen to BTS. Most people in the United States still don't like K-pop. And it's primarily because, I guess in the US case, it's their view of Korea then becomes shaped by their own views of whether they like Asians and Asian American people, how they think about Asia. And so for many Americans, if it's not from Europe, or if it's not from another English-speaking country, then it's not really something that they very much care for, right? And so for now, the Korean wave has been fairly influential in Asia. It's been somewhat influential in Eastern Europe, also in Latin America, also in what we might call, this is kind of a problematic term, what people might refer to as the Middle East. So the Korean wave has spread that far, but it hasn't quite penetrated the West much yet, although it's possible that it starts doing that more, especially with music. But certainly less so with television and also less so with films too. Can I have our next slide? So I think there's a question though, that maybe for people who feel uncomfortable about Korean media being widespread in Indonesia or popular in Indonesia, people might wonder if this is also another form of cultural imperialism. place to another, but not back and forth. The unidirectional movement of media and Western ideology into the rest of the world. Right? And he was in particular concerned about U.S. media because he thought that U.S. media going around the world would then eventually create kind of a U.S.-based monoculture. That everyone would be kind of like the U.S. Right? And so this was his particular view. And we want to also say that maybe with this particular idea of cultural imperialism is, and I guess my question right now that I want us to think about is the Korean way also a kind of cultural imperialism, or is it not? Right? And so let's go to our next slide. No, actually, maybe I'll stop and deal with these first. So I guess I'd say the first question for me is, how does the Korean way fit with this definition? Does it fit with the definition? How does it fit? And then maybe we could ask, how does it not fit too? How does it fit with that definition?
Oke, selamat. Saya tanya, apakah Korean Way atau gelombang Korea itu bisa disamakan dengan penjajahan budaya, cultural imperialism? Nah, ada yang mau kasih pendapat? Kira-kira? Perasaan terjadi nggak? Oh, oke.
Saya Tami. Jadi menurut saya ini enggak atau iya. Karena ini, ketika kita nggak bisa mengontrol budaya kita sendiri, kita nggak tertarik sama budaya sendiri. Nggak hanya Korea kok. Dari manapun kita bisa terjajah gitu. Jadi intinya di sini tuh kepercayaan diri kita aja. Nah, kalau misalnya terjajah atau enggak, sebenarnya itu bisa buat dijadiin kayak semacam kolaborasi antar budaya.
I feel like that's a very good response. So, from my understanding, the response was that it depends on the individual and whether the individual becomes, I guess, overwhelmed by this other cultural force, or whether they're able to use it in some way that's productive. Right? So I think that's a very good point. We'll come back to that point in just a little bit. And I want to return to this question for a second too. So as we think specifically about this question or this definition, what is obviously not true about this definition with cultural imperialism in the Korean way? Which should be an obvious answer here. So, most obviously, of course, is the fact that Korea is not the West, and Korea is not the U.S. And so, if we're thinking very specifically about this definition, we would say one way in which the Korean way does not fit the definition is that Korea is not a part of the West. And so if it is imprinting kind of a different cultural ideology or belief system or tradition, then these are things that are separate from what have historically been imprinted around the rest of the world. Right? Does that make sense? One way in which it might be similar, though, which might be problematic, which some of you may feel like is not right, maybe unfair, is the fact that if the Korean way is popular here in Indonesia, unfortunately for many Koreans, they don't know very much about Indonesia at all. They don't know Indonesian television, they don't know Indonesian music, they don't know Indonesian politics, and this, I think, it should probably feel like it is unfair, right? And so one of the things that we might understand about the Korean way too is that at least least in this case, unfortunately for now, most of the movement of culture goes one way, from Korea to Indonesia, not Indonesia to Korea. And we can maybe hope for a time in which that will change. Ideally, I would hope that there would be kind of an equal flow between every nation, so that we can learn and grow and be productive by coming in contact with one another. But that isn't the case right now, right? And so I think that also needs to be considered. So on the one hand, I think she's absolutely right. It is like cultural imperialism in some ways because of unidirectional flow between at least these two countries. But it's also not like cultural imperialism because it isn't about the West trying to colonize our own beliefs and ideologies and our own values, right? Let's go to the next question here. Oh, actually, let's go past that question. The next slide. Okay. So I want to also spend a little bit of time troubling the idea of cultural imperialism even further. And so there have been a lot of critiques about Herbert Schiller's cultural imperialism thesis. And those critiques come from a perspective called globalization, primarily, and at least in this case, with Morley and Robbins. And Morley and Robbins say that we can't say that there's cultural imperialism because cultural flows are multi-directional. It's not just coming from the West to the rest of the world, but it's also about other parts of the world speaking to one another and speaking back to the West too, right? And also that these cultural flows travel through multiple hubs of production and distribution. So this is one of the ways in which we can understand that the Korean wave is not necessarily cultural imperialist, but it is still also problematic, right? And we should deal with that a little bit. Can we get to the next? Okay. So one of the other critiques of cultural imperialism is the idea that audiences around the world are active audiences. So sometimes people would say, I think sometimes maybe some liberal Americans might say something like, we need to stop sending U.S. media around the world. That media is really bad because it colonizes symbolically different parts of the world with American media. Okay. For those of you who watched Avengers Endgame, did anybody watch Avengers Endgame? I guess I'm kind of surprised because it had a $2 billion box office. But for those of you who did watch it, did you feel like you were kind of oppressed with American culture? Maybe some of you did. But for Ian Ng, what she had pointed out is that people don't just receive media and then become that other culture, right? What she says is that people will receive media and then use it in ways that make sense for them. So some of the research about Latin America and also about Indonesian fans who are fans of K-pop point out that one of the reasons that people like K-pop is because it allows them to imagine their own nation and the modernization that it will have without the influence of the West. And so for people in Cuba, for people in Venezuela, at least according to this one research study, people in Indonesia, that this is something that provides people with pleasure. So it's not about becoming Korean or Korean-like, but it's about the idea that it allows us to imagine a future for our own country that develops without the interference of the West. I'm curious, does that resonate at all with any of you too? Is this something that makes Korean media interesting for you, or was this kind of a unique finding in the research? Maybe I'll turn to you, Dylan. So my question was the idea that people will like Korean popular music because it provides an alternative vision of a modern future without the intervention of the West is something that has been found in a number of studies in Latin America and in one study about Indonesia.
Oke, teman-teman David nanya, Kira-kira buat kalian yang suka banget sama K-pop nih, apakah karena sukanya itu karena kalian membayangkan akan seperti itu, atau membayangkan nation kita akan sama sukses seperti itu tanpa ada bantuan dari Western? Karena menurut David dari beberapa research di for example di Kuba gitu kan, mereka suka itu karena karena seperti itu, karena mereka membayangkan negara mereka akan sukses itu tanpa bantuan dari Amerika. Nah, teman-teman gimana nih? Ada yang punya pendapat nggak? Apakah kalian menyukai K-pop? Coba kita lihat lagi ya secara payung besarnya ya. Apakah menyukai K-pop tidak hanya dari opa-opa yang ganteng ya?
Selamat siang sahabat Unas TV, melaporkan langsung dari ruang seminar lantai 3 Universitas Nasional. Kali ini kembali dalam sesi kedua dalam Public Lecture for Student yang bertemakan Korean Wave, Transnational Flow and Reception. Dalam sesi kali ini dihadiri oleh para mahasiswa setelah tadi pada sesi pertama workshop communication dihadiri oleh para dosen-dosen Universitas Nasional. Dengan pembicara yang masih sama yaitu David C.Oh Ph.D. dan sebagai moderator Ibu Dian Meta Arianti selaku dosen Universitas Nasional. Kali ini dalam pembahasannya, Dr. David menyampaikan seputar Korean Wave, di mana sebuah istilah yang diberikan untuk tersebarnya budaya pop Korea secara global di berbagai negara di dunia sejak tahun 1990-an. Umumnya hal ini dapat memicu banyak orang di negara-negara tersebut untuk mempelajari bahasa Korea dan kebudayaan Korea. Gelombang Korea meliputi kesadaran global akan berbagai aspek kebudayaan Korea Selatan, termasuk film dan televisi, khususnya K-drama, K-pop, manhwa, bahasa Korea, dan masakan Korea. Beberapa komentator juga mempertimbangkan kebudayaan tradisional Korea secara keseluruhan menjadi bagian dari gelombang Korea. Populernya drama Korea di stasiun televisi Indonesia terjadi setelah drama negara Asia lain seperti Taiwan dan Jepang diputar. Berbagai stasiun televisi Indonesia mulai menayangkan drama produksi Korea Selatan. Rupanya wabah dari Hallyu atau gelombang Korea ini kemudian berdampak pada pariwisata. Lokasi syuting drama Korea yang terkenal menjadi objek pariwisata yang digemari para turis untuk dikunjungi. Tentu dengan semakin banyak turis yang mendatangi Korea, selain berimplikasi terhadap bertambahnya devisa negara, juga dapat sekaligus lebih mendekatkan secara emosional antara Korea dengan turis. Akan lebih banyak orang yang merasa dekat dengan negara Korea dan pelan-pelan akan memunculkan rasa sense of belonging. Sense of belonging adalah suatu keadaan di mana seorang merasa atau memiliki sesuatu, sehingga dengan perasaan memiliki itu dia akan dengan sepenuh hati menjaga, mencintai, melindungi, dan peduli dengan sesuatu tersebut. Karena hal tersebut, maka Universitas Nasional bekerja sama dengan Fulbright untuk mengadakan public lecture hari ini yang diperuntukkan kepada para mahasiswa.
Ada mungkin yang lain? Can I have one? Okay, kakak.
Hello, my name is Raka. Maybe everybody like Korean wave, especially in younger age. But now we can see phenomenon in children, more like girl band, like example Blackpink, and culture themselves like traditional dancing. Indonesia Are you agree Indonesia have Indonesian web for different for Korean people? Because as far as I know, Indonesia has a beauty culture from every island in Indonesia. And how do Indonesia can have exchange culture for Korean to introduce our culture in Korea?
Oh, okay. So this is a question. Not an answer.
So that's mixed between statement and question, I think. But I think we can get the point. I mean, they see it like it's a positive thing to do, and it's not really like a bad thing. We're able to do it sometimes.
Okay. Well, thank you for your responses. I want to most importantly say that when we think about any media moving from one country to another country, that the most important thing that we should understand, and that I think, is that people will use and enjoy that media for reasons that make sense to them, in this case, as Indonesian people. So some people are worried that if Korean media comes to Indonesia, that means that people will become more Korean and less Indonesian. But I think that that thinking is a little too simplistic, but rather to say that people will use Korean media in this moment right now because for some reason it provides something for people as Indonesian people. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me give you an example of this. So there was a Korean television show called Winter Sonata. And Winter Sonata was very popular in Japan among women who were around their mid-50s, okay, 50s and 60s. And so when Winter Sonata first came to Japan, a lot of Japanese people kind of made fun of it because, look, all these older women like this television show, so it must not be very good. That's Korea is so backwards. And the reason that Japanese women liked this show was not because it was Korea, right? But they liked the show because it reminded them of what their childhoods were like when they were younger. So for them, it was about nostalgia as Japanese women, not to become more like Korean people. Does that make sense? And so whenever we use this media, it's not necessarily to become like this other place, but it's because it provides something for us here now that helps with our own identities now. So that's another major conclusion that cultural studies scholars have found about audiences and their reception of international media. The last point that I have here is a point by Marlon Friday called critical transculturalism. And critical transculturalism is an acknowledgement that there is more hybridity happening because of global media movement, right? That people are becoming, in some ways, hybridity refers to the idea that we form kind of new identities in relation to our home identity and international identities. So it's supposed to be kind of a liberating idea. But he points out that global flows do lead to hybridity, but the power and the direction of that hybridity still favors certain powerful countries. And in this case, it's favoring Korea as a country and Korean media industries in terms of these flows too, right? So again, this is something that we should forget. So yes, globalization is more multiple. Yes, we're able to use media in ways that make sense to us here, but also we need to remember that there still is power happening that favors Korea rather than, in this case, Indonesia, right? And this is part of the reason we can understand why Korean media is less popular in the United States. Because the United States still sees itself, and people in the United States mostly see themselves as more powerful than Korea, right? And so there's less interest in Korea and trying to get something from Korea or learn from Korea, right? If we could have our next slide. So the next thing that I want to do here is to deconstruct the idea of the Korean wave and to think about what the Korean wave means. Hopefully this will be more interesting because I'll have some video clips for you to watch. But when people talk about the Korean wave, they take a couple of things for granted. And one of these things is the Korean part of it. So what is Korean in the Korean wave? I want you to think about this question for a second, but I also want to show you this video, and I want you to tell me if this is Korean or not. So let's watch this video. Okay, so most of us say nothing, but more people say no than they say yes. So this is a group that's called EXP Edition. Are you familiar with them? And they are based in Seoul, but they were a part of an NYU students project on whether non-Koreans could constitute the Korean wave. And so for the most part, EXP Edition has been very unpopular, despite the fact that they sing in Korean. And they're trained in the same system of media production, right? So this is kind of interesting, that many of us would not view this group as Korean. And in fact, my American students who like K-pop are actually very disturbed by this group, because they view this as kind of an attempt by white people to take over even K-pop, right? And so we can kind of, so if this is right, then we can kind of understand that maybe part of the reason that people enjoy K-pop is because it's resisting white and Western culture. So if watching this kind of gives you then maybe that's an emotional reaction to that kind of resistance. Okay, let's watch the next video. Not this one, the next one. With that video, do you know the group? Who's the group? Okay, great, G.I.D.L, right? So with G.I.D.L, so for those of you who don't know the group, only two of the members are Korean in terms of nationality. And then the other members of the group are, I think, 2 Thai and 2 Chinese members of this particular group, right? So it's, in terms of members, it is less Korean than it is other Asian. So for this group, would you consider this music, and also they're singing a song that's very clearly drawing on Spanish influence, right? So with this song, would you consider this Korean, in the Korean way? Or with this group, would you consider them Korean? So now that you know this, who would say yes? Who would say yes, you think that they're Korean? In terms of Korean. One person raised their hand but then felt like pressured by everyone else. Who would say no? It's not.
Kalau kalian, senyorita tadi, senyorita G.I.D.L tadi, kira-kira kalau kalian itu Korean wave nggak? Yes, say yes. They don't want to raise their hand.
Oh, I see. Okay, so this is kind of interesting too, because then maybe it says something about how do we understand the Korean wave? Do we understand the Korean wave as specifically Korean? Or do we understand the Korean wave as more generally Asian? And then maybe we can then say that the Korean wave perhaps signifies for us our own inclusion, even though it is specific to the nation Korea. Right? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Who is that group? Right, great red velvet. So hopefully you could hear the lyrics, but in this case the song is an English language version of a Korean song. And if you're familiar with the members, all of them are ethnically Korean, but they're singing in English. Would that count as Korean in the Korean way? Okay, so some people say yes. Most people, I mean, who said something said yes, but some people say no, right? So maybe language matters somewhat, but also maybe this is about who's participating. And so I think that this becomes kind of interesting too, so that maybe, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong here, but maybe the Korean and the Korean wave is more about the people who are performing, than maybe necessarily the music itself, right? Because of course we can hear that the music is in English. It also draws upon what we might understand as like European house or American hip hop as influences in that music, right? And so maybe this is about a sense of inclusion. Korean, in this case, is a particular Asian group, but that also kind of, for some people, exemplifies Asianness. And so maybe for some of us, this is a claim to Asianness as being valuable and legitimate and mattering too. Okay. I want to get to the other question. If we could flip to the next slide. Or watch that again. So with Korean media, so I want to get to the idea of the Korean part too. So this is about the people involved. But there's also about the music itself that Jin Da-ryong has argued that Korean popular culture is not in itself really Korean at all. That it's just really an imitation of the production styles of the West. Okay, so that's his argument. Dubo Shin had a different argument, and his was that Korean popular culture is not like Western popular culture, which is only about itself, but that because of the export-driven goals of Korean popular culture, as we see with G.I.O., that it is necessarily hybridized to fit with different local cultures, especially with Japan and especially with China as larger media markets, right? So this might be a different way in which we understand Korean popular culture. That for American popular culture, you're going to like it because it's American, right? But with Korean popular culture, the idea is we're going to try to get you to like it more because we will feature at least the people of different nations. And we will make it more international on purpose. And maybe in this way, it helps to create a sense of Korean popular culture, K-pop in particular, as also being kind of a more generally understood Asian pop. Right? And it makes it more palatable, perhaps. But it's a difference in the ways in which we might say cultural imperialism is happening. Because Korean media is very attentive to the local market, at least for China and Japan. While US media is not attentive at all, really, right? It expects that you will like it because it's American. Okay. So I guess my question in this case, and I'd really like to hear from some of you, is whether we think that K-pop is Korean media, whether we think it's hybrid media, or whether we think it's simply an imitation of Western media. What do you think?
Oke, teman-teman ada yang bisa kasih opini? Jadi tadi kita sudah melihat, kita sudah melihat ada J-Idol ya. Oke, David kan sampaikan bahwa apakah sih Korean Wave, apakah memang hanya melulu terkait dengan Korea? Bahasanya Korea, orangnya Korea. Ternyata tadi J-Idol sendiri sebuah grup yang anggotanya itu ternyata ada orang Thailand, ada orang Chinese, ada dua kan seperti itu ya. Kemudian ada juga cover yang semuanya orang Korea, tapi dia bahasanya they speak English, ya. Nyanyinya nyanyi bahasa Inggris seperti itu. Nah, David tadi bertanya, jadi apakah kemudian kemudian ini fit dengan K-pop Korean. Jadi sebenarnya esensi dari K-pop culture atau Korean wave itu seperti apa sih gitu kan? Apakah Korean wave itu adalah pure semuanya harus Korea atau misalkan ada hybrid? Hybrid it means that ada perpaduan tadi, apakah kemudian dari negara lain atau mungkin dari daerah barat. Tapi tadi sempat sampaikan cultural imperialism, penjajahan budaya ya. Kalau dari definisinya penjajahan budaya itu terkait dengan masalah western ya, ada westernnya. Jadi sebenarnya definisi itu nggak fit ke Korean wave seperti itu. Nah sekarang ada yang mau kasih opini terkait dengan pertanyaan tadi, apakah Korean wave, K-pop is a Korean, K-pop itu harus pure Korean atau dia hybrid, ada influence dari negara-negara yang lain atau bagaimana? Please raise your hand. Ada yang punya opini? Yes.
Jadi tadi kan kita udah melihat 3 MV kan, 3 musik video. Nah, di yang pertama itu ada satu boy group. Nah, tapi di sini kita melihat dari segi visual. Boy group itu mereka punya visual yang not Korean, like that. And J-Idol tadi kan dibilangnya itu punya member yang beda-beda dari negaranya. Tapi kenapa itu bisa dibilang Korea? Karena mereka pakai style Korea. Orang-orangnya pun, membernya pun itu mirip dengan Korea, kayak gitu. Nah tadi yang terakhir, Red Velvet, itu mereka pakai Inggris gitu kan. Nah tapi di sini lagi-lagi stylenya terus Korea. Jadi kalau menurut aku itu yang bisa dibilang Korea itu ketika itu semuanya itu mirip sama dan kembar, nggak kembar juga sih ya dari visual. Terus kalau visualnya itu ini banget sih, itu pengaruh banget. Makanya waktu itu ada satu agency di Korea, itu mereka itu ngadain audisi di Indonesia. Nah terus di situ aku ngedengar ada rumor kalau misalnya visual kalian gak sama kayak Korea, kalian gak akan bisa debut di Korea, kalian gak akan bisa jadi boy group atau girl group di Korea gitu. Iya kayak gitu. Karena berarti di sini aku juga mikirnya di sini berarti ini pengaruh juga karena mungkin salah satu strategi dari Korea supaya bisa nyebar-nyebarin ya ibaratnya itu ke negara-negara lain supaya identitas Korea itu nggak hilang gitu aja walaupun ada dari negara beda.
I wish I could understand. It was so passionate.
She explained quite a lot, but I think she got a point. I mean, you have a good point in that. So she said that the first we saw the boy band. Okay, so from visually they just like they don't look like Korean, right? But the language, the sound, visualnya kan nggak seperti Korea kan? Yeah. Okay, yang boy group. Okay. The second is J-Idol. The member is different from the nationality, like you said before, but they still have like kind of an identity look like Korean, something like that. And then the physically the Red Velvet, even they use English, but they still taste like Korean. Taste with the physically and everything, something like. So she said that maybe all can be different, but they have a signature of Korea. Maybe can we see like from the movement, from the physically, and she just mentioned that she has an experience. Maybe yes, one of the agency from Korea came to Indonesia to have some kind of recruitment audition, something like that. And she said that the agency said if you don't look like Korea, you cannot have a debut in Korea, something like that. So you should have, maybe appearance like Korean or maybe move like Korean, something like that. So maybe it's the strategy from Korea to set like that to spread the virus. So the identity of Korea is actually reappears in every kind of visual or humor or something like that. So that was just like that. Thank you, kita kasih applause dong buat Tami. Thank you, Tami.
So I think if I hear a response to the specific question too, it might be to say that maybe it is in some way specifically Korean or maybe hybridized as Korean, but it's definitely not just an imitation of the West, because there's something, I think you said taste, but there's like a Korean taste within that particular music or the performers who are performing in it. And maybe things are shifting at least a little bit, I don't know, because there's at least 2 new groups now that also feature Indians within their group as well. And so perhaps this is obviously a way to try to get into the Indian music market, but it also might be understood as a way in which the boundaries of who gets considered Korean or Korean enough gets shifted a little bit more. I will say that for most Koreans, when they see the groups, they know very clearly who is Korean and who is not Korean because of our familiarity, I suppose, with how we look. But certainly, it starts to create perhaps more fuzziness around what Korean looks like and maybe who belongs as a part of Koreans. So thank you for your response. I thought that was terrific. Again, I wish that I could have understood it. Let's go to the next slide here for a second. So I want to deconstruct the other part of the metaphor, the wave. Oh, let's skip that. The wave idea. And so usually when people talk about the Korean wave, they primarily talk about it in terms of the size or the power of the wave. And I want to understand the Korean wave a little bit more differently. I think it doesn't like me. One of the differences that I want to talk about here is also the movement of the wave as well. And so we did talk about how the movement is predominantly unidirectional. But I also want to point out that the movement is not only unidirectional. That if we think of the wave as water, that whatever it touches, it will eventually become a little bit of. Right? And so an example that I want to share with you is with Vietnam. So the Korean wave has also spread into Vietnam. It's become pretty popular there, and it's become fairly well received. The view of Korean people has increased dramatically since the time of the Vietnam War, where Koreans were also involved in the US side, and so there was a lot of animosity around Koreans. But now the mood around Koreans is very good, I guess I'd say, around 76 favorability for Koreans. But because of this, that also means Korea has become more receptive to Vietnam. As I started to see Vietnam care and become more interested in Korea, Koreans started to become more interested in Vietnam. Primarily, this has happened mostly in travel and in food, but also in marriages. But eventually, perhaps we'll see more and more of Vietnamese influences entering into South Korea as a result of the wave. So I do want to point out that despite the fact that the wave is primarily one-directional, that it also receives influences from other places too, which ultimately changes the character of South Korea as a nation as well. Let's go to the next one. So another aspect of a wave or of water is its instability and also of its ever-changing nature. And so the thing that I want to point out with the Korean wave as well is that as a cultural industry, one of the things that the media are doing and what they have to do, partly to differentiate themselves, partly to have more expansion into foreign markets, is to change and to continually draw upon different influences. And I think that we can start to question what those mean. For example, is this a form of appropriation? Is it simply taking from a different culture in order to enrich itself? Or is it a form of cultural hybridity, where Korea itself becomes somewhat changed by their uses of different nations' media and different nations' culture? right? And so I think that this is a question. I don't know that it's a resolved question, but it's something that we might start to think about. But it tells us a little bit about what K-pop is like. Let's go to the next, actually, let's go to the next slide here for a second. Okay, so that was the unidirectional one. Let's go to the next one. I want to show you this clip of Swateji and the Boys. Are you familiar with them? They were the most popular Korean band in the 1990s. Enormously influential, and they were the ones who really set off and created this Korean popular culture industry that's rooted in American hip-hop, and as I was saying during lunch, that also borrows from a little bit of Japanese popular culture influences, in particular the idol system group. So let's watch Swateji Boys. So I hope if it demonstrated anything, that Korean popular music is very different than when it first started. And when this first started, it was important for Koreans because it expressed the discontent that they felt after the authoritarian governments and their newfound democracy. Right? And so rap became a vehicle through which Korean people could express that frustration, young people could express their discontent, but this is what it was like. But I point this out to say that, like the wave, that Korean media, Korean popular culture is also shifting. And even within this little over a decade-long period, we can see that the shifts have been pretty profound. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay. And so this final point about the wave, which I kind of understand with this metaphor of wetness, is really about the power of the Korean wave and the influence that it has. And so in this case, I suppose the question that I would like us to think about, if we think about water, and this kind of inequality in this flow, is whether the water of this Korean wave is something that is rejuvenating, refreshing, or if the water of this wave is oppressive and dominating. Right? And that's a question that I really would like to open up to all of you. Do you feel that this movement of this particular tide of the Korean wave is something that is rejuvenating for you? Or is it so much that it becomes domineering and oppressive?
Okay, so the last question of David is, kalau kita lihat tadi slide terakhir ya, wetness basah, kan tadi kan gelombang itu kan ada definisi dari gelombang self, kemudian nah terakhir adalah dari sisi wetness atau basah. Apakah menurut kalian serbuan atau apa ya, cultural wave itu, Korean wave itu menyegarkan atau too much, terlalu banyak sehingga kemudian represif, kayak aduh sumpah banget semua orang kayaknya ngomongin soal BTS, semua orang ngomongin tentang misalkan Park Shin-hye misalkan seperti itu, or what. So, do you have any, selain Tami ya, coba yang lain, selain Tami, ada yang punya opini nggak? Apakah menurut kalian terpaan dari Korea ini sekarang ini terlalu banyak atau enggak? Pokoknya udah menyegarkan, kok menyenangkan, kok ngeliat yang cantik, yang ganteng gitu kan? Atau seperti apa? Atau mungkin nggak dua-duanya? Do you have any opinion guys? Ada yang punya opini kan? Silakan. Raka.
Ya, saya pakai bahasa Indonesia kan. Jadi kalau menurut saya di sini kadang lahir itu melihat orang. Jadi maksud saya ini, di Indonesia kan kulturnya kan beragam ya. Maksudnya kalau di Korea kan maaf sedikit agak ini yang rasis, bukan rasis sih jatuhnya. Kalau di Korea itu kan hanya untuk suku kulit putih yang bermata sipit. Nah tapi kalau yang di Indonesia kan ada yang matanya sipit, ada yang kulitnya hitam, ada yang matanya belok, ada yang segala macam. Terkadang orang Korea pun juga sebenarnya iri tahu sama kita, iri sama budaya kita. Kenapa? Buktinya di sana dikenal dengan Gangnam Beauty, di mana mereka tuh melakukan operasi plastik demi memperbesar matanya, memancungkan hidungnya seperti orang barat. Namun pada hakikatnya karena mereka itu saling mengagumi sebenarnya. Orang Indonesia rata-rata matanya belok. Nah kalau melihat orang matanya sipit itu, ih lucu ya gitu. Kayak kalau lagi senyum tuh matanya merem gitu. Nah kayak gitu. Sedangkan kalau orang Korea itu menurut dia mata sipit itu kayak udah biasa aja sih. Itu udah sesuatu kayak dia melihat cewek mata sipit cantik udah biasa gitu. Tapi kalau melihat Raisa gitu, ih dia is so beautiful. Dia tuh cantik banget, matanya besar. Iya mungkin kalau yang di Blackpink mungkin orang Korea lebih suka siapa sih yang belum Lisa ya, yang dari Filipina ya, karena dia Thailand. Ya kan nggak tahu. Iya maksudnya dia tuh punya ciri khas tersendiri di Blackpink. Kalau yang Blackpink itu mukanya mirip-mirip tuh, sipit-sipit antara si Jennie sama si siapa lagi tuh nggak tahu. Ya maksud saya itu sih tanggapannya. Jadi kayak kita tuh sebenarnya punya keunikan tersendiri gitu. Jadi saling mengagumi itu wajar sih.
Cuma esensi dari pertanyaannya belum dijawab nih Raka. Pertanyaannya adalah menurut Raka, kira-kira gelombang Korea ini yang sekarang ada gitu kan, apakah menurut kamu itu refreshing atau malah terlalu represif gitu, terlalu yang terlalu everything is to be Korean?
Kalau menurut saya sih kayaknya udah biasa aja sih, cuman lebih pengaruhnya itu kalau yang anak remaja mungkin udah bisa kontrol ya Mem ya. Tapi yang saya agak raguin tuh kayak anak-anak kecil sih Mem, karena sayang banget kan kalau zaman sekarang kan anak-anak kecil tuh udah jarang banget main petasan bulan Ramadan. Kalau dulu kan rame, ibaratnya bulan Ramadan tuh kayaknya di luar tuh kayak banyak anak kecil main, entah itu mainan tradisional lah, entah itu kayak perang sarung lah atau main tak umpet. Sekarang udah nggak ada karena mereka tuh udah terfokus sama gadget. Mungkin yang terutama untuk perempuan yang suka ngelihat beauty blogger dari Korea, atau yang cowok-cowoknya mungkin suka sama yang Korean style kayak rambut, mungkin dia ngikutin kayak gitu segala macam. Jadi agak lebih ke arah anak kecilnya sih Mem. Anak kecilnya udah jarang.
Concernnya ke anak kecilnya ya, untuk wave-nya itu ya, akhirnya ya.
Kan udah banyak video parodinya juga kan yang kayak Blackpink.
Bucin. Bucin, Blackjack. Iya benar.
Itu sama ibu. Nah kalau yang Korean yang cowoknya itu yang BTS tuh diperagain sama anak-anak SMP. Kayak gitu sih.
Thank you Raka. Oke. Ada lagi?
Ini tambahkan mau nambah.
Waduh, gue translate gimana ini? Jadi kalau oke, one more. Oke.
Nama saya Fadli Capaat. Kalau menurut saya sih apa tadi pertanyaannya? Lupa. Sorry. Kalau dibilang Korean Wave itu masuk secara masif apa enggak ya? Kalau menurut saya sih sedikit saya masif, tapi ada alasannya. Alasannya karena Korean Wave itu memang bisa diterima dari beragam lapisan masyarakat lah. Misalkan kalau misalnya kalau orang-orang itu Korea tidak hanya melulu soal K-pop, kadang-kadang makanan dari Korea itu juga bisa jadi gitu. Makanan Korea, laki-laki paling yang disukai dari Korea itu olahraganya misalnya kayak taekwondo gitu kan, atau enggak ngomongin beberapa pemain sepak bola dari Korea juga ada misalnya kayak yang dari Tottenham itu Son gitu. Kalau cewek-cewek biasanya ya maaf ya, kalau cewek-cewek itu notabene-nya ya gak jauh beda ngebahas boyband lah gitu lah, atau enggak belajar lotte itu kan lotte aslinya kan itu dari Korea itu kan lotte, kadang-kadang belajar ke situ lah. Sekarang ada iklan ya lotte bisa belajar di online gitu.
Oke, terima kasih Raka Fadli. So, mungkin saya wrap up aja ya. So, David, Raka just mentioned that sebenarnya gini, the point is about the Korean wave. He thinks that maybe for teenager, maybe for like adults like them, it's not too repressive, it's not too much. But he concerned about the children because right now children is already like they can access Korean wave through the age, through the YouTube. Like for example, my daughter itself. My daughter is 6 years old, and every Sunday or every moment of her time, she can access permisi, halo, boleh, hai, halo. Oke, terus jadi kita ini ya, dancing gitu ya, penguin nanti kalau orang. Oke, so back to that one. So he concerned more about the children, about the Korean way, because there's no filtering or something, and they can access everywhere. And for Mr. Fadli Sabaat, he said that more likely it's not too massive because in this term, it's not just about like music or entertainment, but it's also about food. It's also about sport, taekwondo or something, which like maybe some of us like that very much. So that's actually both of the answer. And a little bit additional about Raka. Raka also mentioned that maybe they, it's not just we're also admire Korea, but maybe Korea is also admired, for example, Indonesia, because Indonesia has kind of a big eyes, while Korea is also known as the plastic surgery or something, something like that. So that's actually the wrap up of the answer.
Thank you. Apparently I missed most of the jokes though. So that's unfortunate. But thank you for your responses. I think that's terrific. I guess what I'd like to close this presentation with is, as we think about the Korean wave, I suppose I would wrap up by saying that it seems that Korean media have become something that is popular in Indonesia. But I again want to emphasize that the reasons for its popularity are mostly related to what Indonesians find valuable for themselves. And so to the extent that Korean media plays a role for them, then I hope that Korean media is popular, but to the extent that it doesn't, I hope that Korean media does not become popular. So as long as it's meaningful for Indonesians, I hope that you are able to use and enjoy, criticize Korean media in ways that provide the most agency and the most empowerment for you here. So I will close my presentation now, and then I suppose we will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you so much, David. Okay, guys, so this is the end of David's presentation. So if you have any question, maybe I will open like 2 sessions. Each of the session, maybe 1 or 2 questions. Who wants to take a question?
Ada yang mau tanya, silakan. Everything about Korea.
Nama saya Penny. Kan kali ini sudah terkenal banget ya. Dengan jadi kayak saya melihatnya kayak anak-anak orang Korea sendiri itu lebih suka kayak dansa pop, hip-hop dengan pakaian-pakaian yang lebih ke barat-baratan. Orang sana sendiri melihat nggak sih kalau kali ini kayak perubahan identitas mereka kayak Korea lebih terkenal dengan popnya, hip-hopnya, bukan kayak musik tradisionalnya, baju-baju tradisionalnya, atau kayak nilai-nilai luhur yang lebih tradisional gitu.
Pertanyaannya. Ada lagi yang mau tanya? Ya. Mana?
Hello, my name is Jessica. I have a question. I met some Korean people, so I think the attitude is good, but Yes, because when I met Korean friend, it's like all is a boy because they like both touch my body or touch my friend body like hey like hug something like that. Is it right? Our Korean people men is Beyonce or not? And I wanna ask something. I watch Korean drama and about bullying. Is it right in Korean have money bullying or not? Or is just about the drama? Thank you.
All right, so for the first question that Penny had asked, so if I understand the question correctly, it was about whether Koreans are concerned about the loss of traditional culture as a response to modern contemporary culture. I would say for the most part that most Koreans aren't necessarily concerned. And the reason that they're maybe I would argue that the reason that they're not necessarily concerned is that there's become a mindset that's been created following the Korean War. And after the Korean War, one of the things that Koreans had realized is that the reason that they found themselves in the situation that they did, which was colonized by Japan, that had the neo-colonial presence of the United States in Korea, and that it was because they had rejected modernization. So this has become one of the driving narratives of South Korea, that it rejected modernization, and because of that, other countries' militaries became much stronger, and therefore they were able to dominate South Korea. So for many Koreans, one of the goals after the Korean War was to try to industrialize as quickly as possible and to modernize as quickly as possible. So I think that that still drives much of how Korean people think about culture, is that it's primarily a forward-directed idea of how can we improve ourselves and make ourselves better. And I suppose the most important holidays are still certainly practiced in South Korea. But in terms of traditional music, in terms of other things, these are mostly elite concerns. These aren't the concerns of everyday people for the most part. For the second question that I got, which was Jessica's question, part of it, so the first part of the question, were you using a Korean term? Is that, okay, so you were saying kante, right? Okay, and the question was, are most men like this?
Korean.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to answer that question. I guess I would say, and we see this kind of with some of the scandals that have happened recently, that there certainly are some people who are. And part of this has to do with the fact that in Korea, for the most part, partly because of the military culture, since every man has to go to the military, that men and women often socialize separately. And when men get together, sometimes they talk and do things that are not good. I guess I'll put it that way. And that becomes socialized as a way of men thinking about women and their relationships to women. Certainly there are going to be some people who are gay. But is it more than other places? Is it more than the United States? I don't know that I can answer that question effectively. I haven't seen the research that would say that it is. But I certainly would, I guess I'd say there are some people, when they see the kind of carefully created images of the idols, that they think that all
Korean men are going to be very like gentle and pure and kind. This is not true, right? Men are, I guess, I don't mean to be too universalistic about this, but generally speaking, men are men wherever you go. And there are some good ones and there are some bad ones, right? So for some people who emphasize Korean men being better or nicer or kinder, I don't think that that's true. To your other question about bullying, is there bullying that happens? Maybe, but I think for the most part, bullying in South Korea is more passive. And so the kind of bullying that you mostly see is this idea of wakda. Are you familiar with that term necessarily? Wakda, or I think the other is wasa. But anyway, the idea is that people are intentionally left out. So for example, if we're hanging out together, we're friends, then maybe one of these days, one of the friends does something that bothers me. And so I encourage all of my friends to no longer talk to this person. So it's a form of social isolation, right? So that would be the most common kind, I guess, of bullying, but it usually isn't directly verbal or directly physical. It's mostly isolation.
Jessica? Have a... Yeah, okay. Can you please try? Okay, stand up.
I was curious about this. Is it right in Korea have like a gender conflict? Because my friends say men come to military, but women are not. They say in Korea have gender conflict. Is it right? Gender conflict. Yes.
Yeah.
So is there gender conflict because of the military? Do you mean in terms of women joining the military? Oh, okay. So for example, do men feel like women should join the military too since they have to serve? Is that what you mean? Not that particular conflict. So there, maybe there's two kinds of conflict that result with men joining the military. The first conflict, maybe this is the funnier one, but that when men come back from the military, they talk about being in the military all the time. And so for many women, they do dislike this. The two topics of conversation that Korean women joke about hating the most are conversations about the military and about soccer. But more seriously, the gender conflict that emerges is that for many men, that in Korea there is about 15% unemployment for young people. So this is the backdrop, 15%. And so for young people, there's a lot of competition for jobs. So currently, men receive additional points in their application if they've served in the military. So some men don't get those points because they're physically unable to serve, or for some other reason they did not serve in the military. They serve in some other capacity. Okay? But for most men, they do. They serve and they get these additional points. And so it makes it not a lot easier, but it makes it a little bit easier for men to get these jobs. Does that make sense? So if the two candidates are completely equal, and the man went to the military, then he will receive a little bit extra points on his application. So for many Korean feminists, they believe that this is a sexist legacy of employment, and that we should get rid of it. But that creates some degree of conflict because for men, they say, we've given up 2 years of our lives for the country, and we get nothing out of it. There's no consideration for that service. And so that does create some conflict in the labor market. But I would say generally that's the major form of conflict. I think one of the advantages, I think, and maybe this is kind of paradoxical of men serving in the military, is that I think that for most men, that their service is the defining feature of masculinity. So if they served in the military, then it doesn't matter if they wear makeup, if they care about fashion, because their masculinity has already been proven through military service, right? And so that in some ways, I think, liberates some men to engage in more gender ambiguous practices that I think is room for possible progressive change.
Okay, thank you, David. Well, since it's only like 15 more minutes, do any of you still have a question about anything? Maybe can David answer, but not about private ya. Do you still have any question, guys? Ada yang masih mau bertanya tentang David? Oh, satu. Oke, Mas Tio, mohon maaf.
Halo, saya Rizka. Saya pakai bahasa Indonesia saja. Saya mau tanya lebih ke dunia budaya pendidikan di Korea. Di dalam drama yang pernah saya tonton itu kebanyakan di drama Korea itu di mana murid itu harus mempertingkatkan nilai atau mutu belajar dia. Apabila dia turun, dia akan terjadinya depresi atau kayak menimbulkan bunuh diri. Apakah dalam sebuah drama itu merealisasikan sebuah dunia pendidikan di Korea itu seperti itu apa tidak?
So, I suppose the short answer to your question is yes. That there is a lot of pressure on children to go to the right school. And the right school is defined, you may have, if you've watched the show Sky Castle, you probably know that the three universities that most students want to go to are Seoul National University, Korean University, and Yonsei University. And so there's a lot of competition for those spots because, as we talked about earlier, youth unemployment is so high, right? And so going to one of these really good universities and having those established alumni networks will help you to get a job. So there is a lot of pressure for high-achieving students to do really well. And so they will attend a lot of extra schooling, especially how it is here in Indonesia. Maybe it might be similar. But students will go to school from maybe as soon as it starts at 8 in the morning and then go home around 10 or 11 p.m. and study for another 2 or 3 hours before they go to sleep. And they're just studying all, yes, there's a lot of pressure. And for high-achieving students who don't make it, then it certainly can create a lot of depression for them too. The one thing that I hesitated about a little bit is that for students who don't really care that much, then it doesn't create that kind of pressure. So for middle-achieving students, low-achieving students, then they've in some ways given up already. And that's its own kind of problems too, but it's not necessarily maybe depression, right? But maybe societal discontent or something like that.
Do you get the point? So yes, it does happen in Korea. So people, especially children, get a lot of pressure. So in terms of grade, kok jadi saya ngomong bahasa Inggris lebih baik. Jadi memang di Korea pressure-nya sangat tinggi sekali untuk terutama misalkan teman-teman yang ada di tingkat sekolah. Jadi itu yang menyebabkan bahwa di Korea itu ada 3 university yang menjadi universitas unggulan lah atau pengen banget diraih gitu kan. Satu adalah Seoul University, Yonsei University, your university, right? And the other Seoul National University, Korean University, and Yonsei University. Jadi 3 universitas itu yang paling top dipengen. Tapi tadi David juga sampaikan. Halo. Hai. Hai. sampaikan tadi bahwa untuk anak-anak yang tidak terlalu care tentang grade, mereka udah give up gitu kan, so it's a matter. Mungkin mereka nggak, cuma yang sangat perhatian terhadap grade-nya gitu, jadi turun sedikit, itu versi something like that. Okay?
Yeah, I'll just add one other word, and that's that for many Koreans, they feel like the nation itself has few natural resources. The country is small. The country has a very small population. And so for many Korean people, they feel like the only way for Korea to be successful globally is by increasing its human resources. And so societally, many people feel like this is a cost for Korea to become as successful as it's become. To have students, to have their children learn as much as possible, to become as educated as much as possible, because it's only through human resources that the country can develop. And so, so there's some, I guess there's generally some willingness to allow this kind of pressure because they feel like it is good for the development of the country.
Oke, jadi tadi David tambahkan bahwa selain itu juga ada kesadaran bahwa orang-orang Korea berpikir bahwa negaranya kecil, SDM-nya juga, SDA-nya juga terbatas, sumber daya alamnya terbatas, sehingga satu-satunya cara untuk meningkatkan kesuksesan negara ada melalui SDM-nya, gitu. Itu juga mempengaruhi Korea untuk pikir untuk maju seperti itu. Jadi dengan meningkatkan kualitas dari SDM-nya melalui tadi anak-anaknya di crash untuk bisa pintar gitu kan, sekolah tinggi, kemudian nah itu menjadi salah satu faktor apa tadi pertanyaan dari Nara ya, memang walaupun salah satunya karena tadi ada pressure juga dari pemerintah untuk seperti itu. Okay, so I think this is the end of our session. Before we close, So before we close the session, David, would you care to, you want to put another closing statement maybe?
No, I think the only thing that I want to say is thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for your attention. Maybe because I'm receiving so many Korean questions, I also feel like I need to also, I'll just do this as well and say, 감사합니다.
Thank you, David. Okay, so sekali lagi kita tepuk tangan untuk David ya untuk kasih kita presentasi hari ini. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is the end of our session. We do have another activity tomorrow, international conference. Jadi teman-teman yang mungkin sudah daftar kemarin ya, untuk yang lain ya, atau bisa join international session, international conference kita di besok. Saya sendiri atas nama program studi komunikasi meminta maaf apabila ada hal-hal yang sekiranya kurang berkenan, baik itu in terms of bahasa maupun juga dari segi perilaku. Semoga sukses untuk semuanya, selamat berpuasa dan semoga kita semua diberkahi oleh rezeki yang melimpah. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.